Yes, Ms. Sonic.
Thank you, Your Honors. As of 31 January, 6,006 individuals from Srebrenica have been identified via DNA analysis by the ICMP. The exhibit for this is P4494. Of these people, 5,358 have been identified from mass graves and 648 from surface remains. We know that the total figure is a conservative one, since not all human remains have been exhumed, examined, matched, or even located. The vast majority of the 5,358 identified from graves have been identified via DNA from primary and secondary mass graves connected to the major execution sites of Kozluk, Branjevo Farm, Bilica Dom, Petkovci Dam, Orahovac, as well as Kravica and surroundings. With respect to the Kozluk execution site, primary and secondary graves, currently a total of 1,040 victims have been identified via DNA analysis from the graves related to the Kozluk execution site. This is without counting the 14 victims identified from the Kozluk surface remains, of whom 12 were reported as missing from Potocari. Additionally, an anthropological minimal number of individuals, MNI, estimate of 400 persons, has come out as a result of last year's exhumation of the Chanchari 4 and the Chanchari 6 secondary graves, which should be confirmed by future DNA identifications. And finally, we should keep in mind that we do not yet have the DNA results or MNI estimates for the Chanchari 1 grave related to the Kozluk exhumations, to the Kozluk execution site, and Chanchari 1 is scheduled for exhumation in the course of this year. With respect to the Branjevo Farm, Bilica Dom related primary and secondary graves, currently there is a total of 960 victims who have been identified via DNA from related graves. In addition, there is an anthropological MNI, minimum number of individuals estimate, of 84 people for Chanchari 8 secondary grave, which was exhumed last year, and which Mr. Jans has testified is related to the Branjevo Farm execution. From Petkovci Dam, currently 805 victims have been identified via DNA analysis from graves related to this execution site. With respect to Orahovac, currently 807 persons have been identified from the graves related to this execution site. Finally, from Kravica, currently 1,319 victims have been identified via DNA analysis from the graves which are related primarily to the Kravica site. As discussed in the prosecution final brief at paragraph 1087, as well as in the Janskor addendum, exhibit P4492, and in his testimony at references 33.518 to 33.520, 33.527, and from 33.638, approximately over 100 individuals buried in the Kravica-related graves are not from Kravica. While it may never be possible to figure out the precise number of those individuals who are not from Kravica, Jans's explanation and testimony, cited above, as well as the testimony of the two Kravica survivors, that the respective rooms they were placed in the Kravica warehouse were filled to the brim, this would be witness PW156, at transcripts T094 to T7095, and PW111 at transcript reference 6690. Taken together with exhibit P4529, which is the declaration of investigator Blaszczyk regarding the Kravica warehouse measurements, show that approximately 500 men could fill up each of these two rooms in the warehouse. Therefore, it is the prosecution's position also cited at paragraph 1987 of its final brief, that a minimum of 1,000 individuals were brought to the Kravica warehouse prior to the executions, and that they were executed there. In addition to the current number of 1319 individuals who have been identified, there will likely be more identifications related to the Kravica execution site, coming from last year's exhumations of the Zeleni Jadar 1A and Zeleni Jadar 1B graves. Further references, specific references to the related graves, can be found in Dusan Jance's report, Annex A.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Sullivan, but at one point at page 75, line 1, it's 1309, and you just mentioned 1319.
Indeed, thank you, Your Honor. Indeed, it should be 1,319 individuals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, in addition to these almost 5,000 individuals, and the exact number is 4,931 individuals coming from these graves, and I just want to point out to you the exact location in Annex A where the listing of all these graves is located. This would be at ERN X019 4271 to X019 4272 of Annex A of Mr. Jance's report, which is P4490. Now, in addition to these total of 4,931 individuals found in these graves from these mass executions, we also have an additional 413 individuals found in graves which are either primary undisturbed graves, mass graves which were previously known to the ICTY, such as Cerska. Sorry, this would be 413 individuals who are found then in undisturbed mass graves previously known to the ICTY, such as Cerska, Nova Kasaba 96 and 99, Sandici, Konjević Polje, and Trnovo, as well as smaller individual and other graves, which include Bišina, Motovska Kosa, Brežljak, Potočari, and others, all of which are listed in Dusan Jance's report. Your Honors, taking into account the fact that there are currently 5,358 men who have been identified from graves, mass graves, that there is an estimated minimum number of individuals of approximately 500 persons, which were recovered last year from the three Chanchari graves, Chanchari 4, 6, and 8. Taking into account that there is, as of yet, an unknown number of other individuals who were recovered last year from the Zeleni Jadar 1A and 1B graves, as well as with the knowledge that there are new exhumations taking place this year, including that of the Chanchari 1 secondary mass grave, as well as that there are continuing identifications still arriving from previously exhumed graves, there is no question that at least 6,000, but most likely more, Srebrenica individuals who are either separated at Potočari or who surrendered and were captured from the forest were buried inside mass graves, as well as smaller or individual graves. With respect to the surface remains, Your Honors, we know that since 1996, 957 cases of surface remains were collected, of which 648 have been identified via DNA identification. We know from Annex B of Mr. Jance's report that the vast majority of these surface remains identified individuals, and the precise number is 538, were located in the Pobuđe area, the area just before the Konjević Polje crossing. While with respect to many of the surface remains identifications, we may never know what happened, at least with respect to two locations, Nezuk and Snagovo, we have evidence that executions took place along the column route. This means that not all surface remains represent battle casualties, but on the contrary, that they represent victims of executions. In addition to the testimony we have from the Snagovo survivor, witness PW106, about the execution which took place at Snagovo, we also have ICMP's identification of one of the individuals mentioned by PW106, and we can find his name at Exhibit P4491, the confidential annex to the Yance report, under case ID SNA-16 at ERN page R065-7769. With respect to the Nezuk execution, in addition to the testimony of the two survivors, the surface remains of one of the 5 individuals mentioned by the survivors has been located as a surface remain at Tisovacosa. We can find information on him under case ID TIS-1 at Exhibit P4491, ERN R065-7766. We also have a few combat reports which show that there were other instances of execution similar to those taking place at Nezuk and Snagovo, using words such as liquidation, neutralizing, to describe the killing of captured Bosnian Muslim men from the Srebrenica enclave by VRS and MUP personnel through July and August. We have seen, for example, the 14 July 1995 regular combat report by the 5th Engineering Battalion Deputy Commander, Mile Simanic. This is exhibit number P2672, in which he states that, quote, about 1,000 to 1,500 enemy civilians and soldiers were arrested and killed, end of quote. When asked about why he had exclaimed, God forbid, upon being presented with this combat report during his previous interview with the OTP, Simanic testified that in his view, this, I quote, constitutes a crime. This is a transcript reference T14641. We also have seen the 19 July 1995 Zvornik Public Security Center report to the MUP Office of the Minister, which states, and I quote, 8 Muslim soldiers were neutralized. We learned from them that some 200 Muslims, armed with automatic and hunting rifles, are located in the sector below the old road, near Snagovo. This is exhibit P4486. It is obvious from the wording of this report that the men must first have been captured, then interrogated, and finally, euphemistically, neutralized. Finally, let us recall the Rogatica Brigade's regular combat report of 8 August 1995, in which the Rogatica Brigade commander Rajko Kušić reports that 5 Balijas from Žepa were liquidated. This is at exhibit P209. This report also stated, and I quote, the same day, in the vicinity of Luke, an unarmed Ustasha, born in Srebrenica, 24 years old, was liquidated. Before he died, he said that he fell behind the others and he was looking for food, end of quote. This man was alive when he was captured, and he was murdered with the full knowledge and authorization of Rajko Kušić, the Rogatica Brigade commander. In addition to the evidence of these types of illegal killings, which are actually reflected in writing, we may never know how many individuals walking in the column may also have been killed by Ljubomir Borovčanin's anti-aircraft guns as they were being called down to surrender. Now, there is no evidence, as the defense argues, that between 1,500 to 3,000 individuals died as a result of legitimate combat. This is argued in Popović brief at paragraph 708, in the Bera final brief at 583 to 586. There is also no evidence that the proximity of Srebrenica-related graves to the column route means legitimate combat casualties were buried there. This is from Bera's final brief at paras 634 to 635. There is no evidence of combat taking place in the rear of the Zvornik Brigade's zone of responsibility at the time of the Branjevo Farm, the Kozluk, the Petkovci Dam, and the Orahovec executions. There is also no evidence of combat taking place either in the area of Glogova or Ravnice, let alone Zeleni Jadar, Budak, Vlečeva. There is, however, plenty of evidence described in detail in Section 3E of the prosecution final brief concerning the separation of numerous men at Potocari, about their surrender or capture from the column on the 13th of July, about their placement on buses or trucks, about their transportation to various holding areas in Bratunac, in Kravica, in the Zvornik area of responsibility, Zvornik Brigade area of responsibility, and finally, plenty of evidence about their ultimate executions. Forensic evidence, survivor testimony, as well as intercept and other evidence show that individuals found in graves in the Zvornik Brigade area of responsibility, as well as in other areas, such as Trnovo and Bishina, were killed at those sites, not elsewhere. Evidence also shows that machinery for the excavation of the Orahovec, Petkovci Dam, Kozluk, Branjevo Farm mass graves was mobilized to be there contemporaneously with the mass execution or immediately thereafter. Again, this evidence can be found at Section 3E of the prosecution final brief, as well as at paragraphs 1080 to 1104 of the forensic connection between graves section, and paragraphs 1155 to 1174 on forensic, DNA, and demographic evidence. Finally, to suggest that the Bosnian Serb army would exhume legitimate battle casualties 2 months after combat in the dead of night and relocate these bodies to isolated, well-hidden areas is implausible, to say the least. Just to address a couple of specific points made in the defense final briefs, there is no support for the conclusion in the Beara defense brief at paragraphs 614 to 616, as well as 636, that individuals found in the Glogova and Zeleni Jadar graves must have died in combat, given findings of shrapnel and grenades. Ample forensic evidence has been presenting, Your Honors, including the Hadley report, Exhibit P4525, the USNCIS Kravica report, Exhibit P678, the Barayba report on Zeleni Jadar, P2576, the testimonies of Jean-René Ruiz, reference page 1468 and 1469 to 1471, as well as Manning at 18978 to 18983. We also have the testimony of survivors and those present in the area during the Kravica warehouse killings, that grenades were being lobbed into the Kravica warehouse during the execution. We have seen photos and a video of grenade handles and fly-off levers found outside of the Kravica warehouse. The reference to that video is Exhibit P1575. Therefore, the individuals located in Kravica-related graves, as a matter of fact, would show signs of shrapnel injury. There is no evidence concerning the fact that bodies of victims from 1992 and 1993 are buried in Srebrenica-related graves, as the Popović defense claims at paragraph 716. The Popović defense cites to the testimony of witness PW161 to argue that bodies of Muslim men who died in 1992 are also buried in the Glogova grave. However, this is a misstatement of witness PW161's evidence. While PW161 acknowledged that he was involved in the burial of 100 to 150 Muslim men in 1992, he clearly stated that these bodies were buried some 10 to 11 kilometers from Glogova. The reference for this is 9398 at line 14. He further stated, and I quote, "I went to the Glogova locality with Mr. Ruiz, but I never told him that in 1992 Muslim bodies had been buried in Glogova. because after Glogova, I took Mr. Ruiz to the locality where the 100 to 150 Muslim bodies had been buried in 1992. This is at 9399, lines 6 to 10. There is also no evidence that bodies from 1992 and 93 were counted as part of the ICMP's DNA identification count, as the Popović defense claims at paragraph 713. The Popović defense refers specifically to the Biečeva 1 grave, stating that, I quote, 46 persons were identified, of which 6 remains were not Srebrenica related, end of quote, noting that these 6 remains were from 1992. Similarly, the Nikolić brief at paragraph 1451 criticizes the overall figure of the 5,358 individuals identified in graves because, among other reasons, and I quote, the Biečeva grave also contains remains of approximately 50 individuals who died in 1992 related events. This makes it sound as though Mr. Jans counted these 6 or 50 bodies of individuals who died in 92 when he was counting Srebrenica-related ICMP DNA identification. The record is clear, however, Your Honors, that Mr. Jans in his count did not count victims unrelated to the fall of Srebrenica. We see this at transcript 33509, 33513, as well as in his exhibit, the report, the exhibit P4490. In fact, Mr. Jans was at pains to explain why he did not count the 9 unique unnamed DNA profiles for Biečeva, as well as 1 unique unnamed DNA profile for Lipje, precisely because of the possibility, or rather the impossibility, of connecting them to Srebrenica-related information for the time being. This can be found at transcript reference 33508 to 33509. The 46 individuals currently identified as Srebrenica missing from the Biečeva 1 grave are individuals who were reported to the ICMP as missing following the fall of Srebrenica in July 1995. These are the only individuals counted by Mr. Jans for the Biečeva grave. Finally, at paragraph 1451 of their brief, the Nikolić defense also argues that this current number of 5,358 individuals identified from Srebrenica-related graves is incorrect because A, an exact number of individuals connected to the Kravica execution site cannot be provided, and B, and I'm paraphrasing, because there is evidence that 12 individuals found in the Cerska grave were alive after July 13, 1995, the date of execution is alleged in the indictment, and were reported as being seen as late as 17 July 1995. Your Honors, neither of these reasons affects the actual figure or the number of individuals identified from each of the exhumed graves. With respect to Kravica, it is clear that 1,319 individuals have been identified, regardless of whether they were executed at Kravica, the Vuk Karadžić school, in grave L, or elsewhere. Similarly, the fact that individuals found in the Cerska grave may have been reported as being captured, or at least reported as last being seen on 16th or 17th July, changes nothing about the number of bodies identified from this grave. In fact, the ICMP DNA data actually underreports the number of individuals for this grave, rendering the figure 5358 a conservative one. Namely, in this instance, we know from Dr. Haglund's report on the Cerska exhumation, exhibit P611, that because it is an undisturbed primary grave, that there are 150 complete bodies which were exhumed from this grave. At this time, we have only 142 ICMP DNA identifications coming from this grave. In conclusion on this topic, Your Honors, evidence shows that thousands of separated, captured, surrendered Bosnian Muslim men and boys from Srebrenica were systematically executed in July 95, that they were buried in mass graves, in many cases reburied, but some of them also left out, becoming surface remains. The prosecution submits that a minimum of 5,358 men identified from graves, but actually closer to 6,000 men when counting the already known 500 estimated minimum number of individuals from last year's exhumations, are all victims of executions. The prosecution also submits that not all of the 648 men identified from the surface were killed in legitimate combat, by suicide, landmine, or by friendly fire. This, for the time being, leaves us with approximately 1,000 to 1,500 individuals we currently have no identification information on. Some of them might not be discovered because they're lying in graves without survivors, or because their bones are shattered in such small pieces inside secondary graves that no DNA can be obtained. However, Your Honors, new exhumations, new DNA identifications continue to take place. And as they continue to come to light, the tragic story of murder of more than 7,000 Muslim men and boys will only serve to underline the gravity of the crimes committed against them and against the Bosnian Muslim population of Eastern Bosnia. Turning very briefly to the second issue, Your Honors, that of the destruction of women and children. The Popović defense, at paragraph 643 of its final brief, states that, I quote, "The prosecution did not prove that the movement of the Muslim population from Srebrenica to the BIH-held territory disabled their normal life and reproduction. Namely, there is no normal living at the time of war." End of quote. Similarly, at paragraph 644, the Popović defense, and I quote, "rejects charges for genocide toward women and children. Events occurred in Potočari after the fall of Srebrenica toward women and children did not have significant impact to their capability to reproduce and did not at all jeopardize the survival of the protected group." Your Honors, the prosecution has dealt in detail with the issue of the destruction of women and children in its final brief at paragraphs 1,105 through 1,128, as well as with the legal aspects of the charge of genocide at paragraphs 2806 to 2834, and will therefore not repeat the discussion here. However, it will briefly make the following point. We have read and heard evidence concerning the impact of the forcible transfer on the population of Srebrenica and Žepa, as well as the separation and murders of the men, which caused incalculable suffering and permanent damage to the tens of thousands of living survivors who have been consigned to a lifetime of physical, mental suffering. The women and children have been traumatized by the events of July 1995. There has been a breakdown of family life since thousands of men have disappeared. There exists the possibility that many of the survivors may never know what happened to the loved ones who went missing. Many have spoken of a pre-war life that was reasonably prosperous, relatively carefree, under the guidance, protection, and leadership of their husbands and fathers. Now that life has changed, and they have been living in abject poverty in many cases, forced to take on responsibilities not normally taken on by the female members of the Bosnian Muslim population of Eastern Bosnia. What once were vibrant communities are no more. The accused, originally from the Eastern Bosnia area, or employed there, knew well about the importance of men in the traditional patriarchal societal structure of Bosnian Muslims of Eastern Bosnia. We talk about this at paragraph 1126 and 1127 of the final brief. Their crimes were deliberately inflicted, resulting in the death of thousands of Muslim men and boys. We have evidence from countless witnesses who have lost multiple male members of their families, some of whom have lost not only their loved ones, but also realized that their family name will disappear, since no men remain to carry it forward. Your Honors, The words that truly bring home the enormity of the tragedy, the abnormality of life, the destruction experienced by those who lost their family members and their old way of life, was cited to by Chief Prosecutor Carla Del Ponte at the opening of this case, at lines 377, or pages 377 to 378. They are the words of witness PW121, a woman who last saw her husband and older son as they joined other men to head off into the woods as Srebrenica fell, and whose youngest son, barely 14 years old, had been violently torn from her in Potocari. At the time this witness testified, she did not know about the fate of her husband and sons, and when asked what she thought may have happened to them, she responded in an anguished cry. I will not take up the court's time today with the video clip of her testimony, though if you would like to read it, it is at exhibit number P2226, transcript pages 5761, especially lines 15 to 22. This woman was a classic example of somebody suffering from the so-called Srebrenica syndrome, living a life on hold, waiting, uncertain about the fate of her loved ones, hoping against hope that they may be alive, unable to move on with her life until finding out for sure. A classic example of destruction, of failure to live normally, of serious mental harm caused to a Srebrenica woman. Could we go into private session for a moment, please, Your Honors?
Yes, let's do that. Let's go into private session for a short while, please.
I take it, Ms. Solian, we didn't hear that witness.
Your Honor, she was a 92 bis witness, and we have her testimony. This is exhibit P2226.
Thank you.
To 2226. And to conclude, Your Honors, while it may be true that, as the Popović defense says, there is no normal living at the time of war, the point here is that since July 1995, there has been no normal living for the tens of thousands of survivors of Srebrenica and Žepa. The story of witness PW121 is just one of many thousands of tragic stories we've heard from those who've survived the horror of separations, the forcible transfers, the loss of loved ones, of property, in two small but now tragically well-known enclaves of eastern Bosnia. Thanks to the advent of DNA matching, some women and children of Srebrenica and Žepa have finally over time begun learning about the fates of their missing men after years of not knowing. However, many tragically still live without knowing, and some perhaps will never know, and will never be able to move on and lead a normal life. This concludes my submission, Your Honors.
Thank you, Ms. Solian. One moment, I will ask him. Second. Okay. Now, Mr. McCloskey, I think you're the one left, and we also have 10 minutes left. Do you want to start now, or shall we continue tomorrow?
Mr. President, I would greatly appreciate it if we could start tomorrow, but I can guarantee you I will be finished by the second period. I don't intend to take more than 2 hours, perhaps less, though it's hard to say. I'm also ready to answer questions or receive any homework that you might have.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Mr. Zivanovic, I suppose you will go first after the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor, that's correct.
You're put on notice that you will be expected to start tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah, but I doubt whether we will have all the time. I don't know. But anyway, you put on notice. You may have to start tomorrow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay? Thank you. We stand adjourned till tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
All rise for your approve it.